Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conclusion, the seventh part of our seven-part series on the Hermetic principles of the Kybalion. Today's topic is the principle of gender, and then we will wrap things up and sort of tie the loose ends together. I'm your host, Dr. John Michael Salvato, and you're watching Inner Alchemy, the Science of Spiritual Living. So let's get started. The principle of gender is in everything. Everything has masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests in all planes. And when we understand this principle, we're able to better understand the process of conscious creation. So in its essence, the great seventh Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there's gender manifest in all of the cosmos, that the masculine and feminine principles are ever present and active in all phases of all phenomena, even in those things that we might have been raised to believe or perceive as inanimate. Now, this is not a new idea. If you think about it, most of us have grown up in a world that's familiar with the Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, the Hindu representation of Shiva and Shakti, and the scientific field would be focused more in terms of Jung's description of the animus and anima, which we'll talk about in a little bit. In essence, the principle of gender works in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. And it understands that everything and every person contains the two elements, or the two principles, the great masculine and the great feminine, or the divine masculine, divine feminine, and that this balance of the masculine and feminine is best understood in a spectrum rather than in polarity. So before we continue, I want to take a moment to talk about the explicit clarification that this text gives us. Remember that the Kybalion was written in the 20th century, at the turn of the 20th century, actually, and it immediately points out that this principle has no reference to, quote, the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which the author recognizes as, quote, prostitution of the principle. You see, he goes on to write, such base revivals of the ancient and infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin the mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded a warning note against these degrading teachings, which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. In the past, there have been those who've attempted to manipulate this passage as being evidence of the author and by extension Hermes' belief that you needed a male and a female in order to create the magic, and to sort of expand their heteronormative values. This principle is not at all about a defective heteronormative ideology. Many occultists and esoteric movements have attempted to promote that, and I want to be very clear that a mindful study of the text will show us that it's a universal law, and perhaps even the first clear and concise statement of the non-binary nature of all beings that are contained within this particular principle. So I think that this idea that in order to, for example, be able to perform certain magic rites, you have to have a biological male and a biological female. Let's get really clear about the fact that that's not only incorrect, that is not only just more evidence of a heteronormative ideology that is diseased and toxic, but that it's also a patently untrue misrepresentation and misunderstanding of the difference between male and female, and the difference between biological genitalia and finally the difference between masculine and feminine. These are not all the same thing. So let's look at that definition of gender. I really like this this yin and yang tattoo art that I put on here, because we have the light and the dark, we have the sun and the moon. The two wolves represented reminds me of a story that is attributed to Native American folks, who which by the way is not accurately attributed. The story goes that somebody asked their grandfather, their great-grandfather, how to control anger, and the grandfather says there are two wolves living within you, and the one that survives, one is anger, and the other is harmony or forgiveness or something like that. And the one that survives is the one that you feed. Now, that is so opposed, diametrically opposed, to Native American spirituality, that it couldn't even possibly have been entertained as coming from that culture. That's just another example of cultural appropriation that's taken place to advance a really disturbing view of toxic positivity. So within the text itself, gender has nothing to do with genitalia. It has nothing to do with sexuality or sexual orientation. It's a reference to the process of conscious creation. The concept put forth in the Kabbalion states that gender exists on all planes, both the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and represents different aspects on different planes. So everything and everyone contain these two elements and principles. So we might call this, as the author did, mental gender. Again, this principle doesn't concern itself with what's between our legs. It concerns ourselves with how manifest phenomena possesses the divine masculine and the divine feminine in varying degrees. It recognizes that physical gender is a spectrum. And we're going to be talking about that on the Brew this week, on Wednesday, as we bring a metaphysician, author, and minister whose child is non-binary, to talk about these spiritual principles and how we can begin to transform the way that we approach not only the way that we approach nurturing our children and the children of the world, but also recognizing that, as I state here on this slide, the divine feminine principle is always working in the direction of receiving impressions. The divine feminine conducts the work of generating new ideas, new thoughts, and concepts, including the work of imagination and conscious creation, while the divine masculine principle is focused in the direction of expressing or sending out, expressing oneself, concerning itself with the will in its varied phases. So we have the give and the take. And both of those are important if you're going to live a balanced life, but both of those are really important if you're going to create anything. Because let's remember, as we've stated in these previous principles, everything is energy. Carl Jung describes the animus as the unconscious masculine side of a woman and the anima as the unconscious feminine side of a man, with each transcending the personal psyche. Now, we can take this one step further into the postmodern vernacular. We can recognize that that both male and female have both animus and anima, that both biological male and female and an identified male and female have both of these. In fact, everything has gender. So we begin to understand that, like gender, that gender itself functions on a spectrum. That just like gender in human beings, gender in the universe itself, as above, so below. So as witches, we recognize the divine order of the cosmos. We connect, we mindfully connect with nature itself. And this puts us in touch with a constant flow of both the goddess and the god energy in all things. So mental transmutation is the ultimate pursuit. It's the reason these 7 principles have been presented in the way that they were presented, and I hope that we've been able to sort of illuminate those a little bit. The Kybalion explains why grasping these 7 Hermetic principles is of importance to the Hermeticist, the alchemist, the practitioner of esoteric arts and sciences. It states mind, as well as metals and elements, can be transmuted from one state to another, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. So we understand these principles, and hopefully from the last 7 weeks, you've been able to find a way to integrate some of this material into your own spiritual practice. And for those who are looking for a way to take it further, the reason for this series in general was to share with you guys the Inner Alchemy Collective. The Inner Alchemy Collective is a group of esoteric practitioners, witches, sorcerers, alchemists, conjurers, and cunning folk who are dedicated to preserving the ancient wisdom while being open to the dynamic and evolutionary process of an ever-changing and diverse expression of that wisdom in a postmodern world. We mindfully choose to operate within the tenets of the Charter of Compassion, and we commit ourselves to honoring and protecting the traditions, beliefs, and practices of all paths of conscious creation. Now, as an organization and as a movement, the membership in the collective is going to include access to a new esoterically focused social network, so that we can have an opportunity to be able to express ourselves without being sort of censored, and without being told by Facebook that our posts somehow violate their community standards. It'll include discounts on classes, workshops, and retreats. It'll also include a listing in the Global Practitioners Network directory. It's an opportunity for us to begin to truly network with one another, not just connect on social media in the terms of developing friendships, which is very important and something that I'm personally grateful for. Not just an opportunity for us to sort of connect as colleagues in a social media group or forum, but actually to work together to help build one another up. And the organization itself is congregational in governance. That means that we govern by consensus. It's not an organization. We recognize that many practitioners come from backgrounds and belong to organizations, covens, sects, churches that are hierarchical in nature. Some of which follow the high priest and high priestess model, others who are solo practitioners which embody both. We don't intend to replace or supplant any of those traditions, and our members remain part of their active spiritual practice, their active communities, obviously. We are a movement that brings those sects, those covens, those groups together, and as such, we didn't want a hierarchy. You've already got hierarchies in your own spiritual practice, or not. We are governed by consensus, which means that every member has an equal voice, and for us, it was the only way to move forward. But at the center of who we are is a commitment to the Charter for Compassion. And so on the next slide, I'm going to play that for you. I'm going to play a short video that explains who and what we are. I hope that gives a better sense of where we are going forward. You can get in touch with us through social media or through by emailing us or visiting us on the web at www.inneralchemy.online, and let us know that you're interested in the collective. There's also more information on the website about that. So I'd like to conclude this with my thanks to each and every one of you for being here. I'd like to thank you for your participation in the discussions about this, and again, I apologize that we've not been able to continue posting the blog articles on Facebook, but their new artificial intelligence scanning of articles has been flagging our posts as being in violation of their community standards and as spam. So until we're able to find out how to resolve that with Facebook, since neither spam nor a violation of their community principles actually exists, then we're just going to be able to put these videos out. So let's get to that video, and when the video concludes, know that I wish you guys well. I encourage you to stay in the moment, to be grateful for everything you've got, and always remember the best is yet to come.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions,
calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures.
To dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there.
To honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being.
Treating everybody without exception.
With absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life
to refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain.
To act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest.
To impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody.
And to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies.
Is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately.
And that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women
to restore compassion
to the center of morality and religion.
To return to the ancient principle
that any interpretation of Scripture
that breeds violence,
hatred,
or disdain
is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information
about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage a positive appreciation of cultural
and religious diversity.
To cultivate an informed empathy
with the suffering of all human beings,
even those
regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world.
Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness.
Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential for human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable in the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.